Good morning, fellow Plexers. Today's video is going out to Adrian, who to many of us is a fellow Plex server on a Synology NAS brother from another mother. Lots of us run Synology hardware. So Adrian has recently moved his Plex server from his NVIDIA Shield to his Synology NAS where his media has been. And he's missing about 500 movies. And I think you can all guess why he's missing them, and it's probably because his Plex naming game wasn't up to snuff, just like mine wasn't in 2019. I had my Plex head up my Plex, you know what, for about the first 9 months, and then realized, oh, Plex has naming support articles? Plex tells me I should do it this way or do it that way, and then everything fell into step. So Adrian, or anyone else watching with a new Plex server on any hardware, I'm going to show you how to find missing titles. But let's talk about how this happened. I would imagine that as you added media to your original server on your NVIDIA Shield, that as things added incorrectly, you probably fix match. Maybe you'd add 3 movies and a couple of them scanned as something else. You probably went in to the 3 dots here and use, where is it? I don't use it ever. Fix match right here. And when you do that, Plex will suggest the right movie and you simply click on it. Well, I'm here to burst a bubble for a lot of people. Fix match is a dirty, nasty crutch that should never, ever, ever be used, because if my guess is right, Adrian's result is proof of the pudding. So, if you add 2 or 3 or 4 movies at a time, the recently added, let me go to recommended, the recently added in that library line will clearly tell you, oh, I didn't add these movies. That scanned as the wrong one, or maybe it wasn't matched. So you go in and use fix match. Quick and easy, but again, it's a dirty, rotten crutch. What happens is if you ever change servers and you have a large library, say you have 2,000 movies, and maybe your naming instincts are sort of good, but not fully up to snuff, maybe 10% of those movies that you added had to be originally fix matched. Well, if you ever have to move that media to a new Plex server, all of that is going to scan in correctly. The 10% of your movies will all scan in correctly as either unknown or the wrong duplicate to a movie you actually have. And then you lost the ability to know that, oh, these last 3 movies were the ones I need to fix match. You have no idea what's a good movie and what's a bad movie if it was matched to the incorrect title. Unmatched movies are easy to spot, and you can sort for those. So Adrian, this is what I want you to do, and I'm using my Performing Arts movie library as the example because I know I have some unmatched titles in that library that I've supplied custom metadata for. So when you're in the web app, not a client app, let's make this full screen, change to the library tab. And first, take a look at the all option and go to unmatched. And you'll see I have 3 movies that are unmatched. Now I've gone in and supplied custom metadata, so to myself or my users, they look like any other matched Plex movie. But if we go into one with the edit button, you can go in and see what the file is. And this actually works the same way. I don't have an example, but you can go to duplicates. And if I had a duplicate, let me switch back to unmatched. I could go in and edit, click info, and it would show the path to both of the movies that were marked as duplicate. So you could see which path was the right movie based on how you named it and which one was the wrong one to then go and rename the media. If you really wanted to use fix match on those, you could click the three dots and there'd be an option to split them apart. Once they were split apart, you'd have two posters of the same movie, and then you could go in and again look at the info to see which one matched correctly, and on the one that didn't match correctly, you could then hit the three dots and you could use fix match on that. I would suggest fixing your media so that in case you change servers again, you never have to worry about this, and going forward, you never have to worry about using that dirty, rotten crutch of a fix match. Have I made my fix match point yet? So that's how you identify them. In between the unmatched and the duplicates, hopefully that will account for all 500 missing movies. And if it does, I know your naming game needs a lot of work. And I have many Plex videos that talk about Filebot to help you quickly get your media in shape. And in almost all of those videos, I go into Plex server support documents for naming movies. There's actually 3 documents to be aware of: the main support article, and then there's a versioning article, and also an edition article. The edition feature is a Plex Pass feature. I love it. And then with the TV shows, you only really have to worry about the one main naming article. So I'm not going to go into that because I cover that in almost every Filebot video on my channel. But right now I am into my DS1520 Plus on my Pop! OS Linux desktop, right in the default file manager. So I'm running Plex on an Intel NUC, but I also have test servers of Plex on this Synology NAS and other devices. So all my Plex media is simply in a shared folder named Plex, which may be confusing to other Synology NAS owners who started with Plex under DSM-6. When you install the package version of Plex on Synology under DSM-6, it creates a shared folder called Plex that keeps its application files in it. Well, I'm not running that version, so I simply use Plex as a shared media folder name. Now, I have an example for some test servers that's all made up of public domain media, and I've simply named that folder Plex PD, and I'll use that instead of my main folder to demonstrate what I think is good folder structure for a growing Plex server. So when I click into it, I've created a folder in this shared folder, folders for each type of Plex library type. This is a sort folder for movie libraries. It's not likely that you'll have multiple music libraries in Plex, so this isn't a sort folder, it's actually a music library. And then an other videos sort folder, and a photo library sort folder, and a TV show library sort folder. And if you ever get into a trash guide setup, to achieve atomic moves, you would want your landing zone for any incoming media to happen inside that same shared folder where your Plex media is, to then automatically be renamed and moved to one of these library folders. That renaming and movement will be instantaneous. If I had a separate shared folder for my Plex movies and a separate shared folder for my Plex TV shows and a separate shared folder for the landing zone, like some trash guides suggest, that means each movement from the landing zone to the proper library is not instantaneous and has to be copied before it's deleted in the original location. And that slows the whole operation down. So my structure is excellent for a trash guides install, and the trash guides actually suggest similar structure. I happen to like mine better, and those instantaneous moves are called atomic moves at the trash guide. So setting up your initial structure if you're a new Synology NAS owner who wants to run their first Plex server, you can copy this. So inside the TV show library sort folder, I have examples of different individual TV show libraries. Now, if you intend to share Plex with friends and family, some of them might have little kids, and you might have little kids, so you might have a separate TV show library for small children. This would be the main movie library. If you ever get into DVRing with an HD home run tuner, you may not want to mix that content into your commercial-free TV show libraries. So I'm showing the example of using a separate DVR library. And then if you're into anime, you may not want to mix your TV shows for that library in with your main one. And this gives you the ability to share libraries with different people. And say your grandparents are on your server and you're a young guy that likes anime and you've got a lot of friends that like anime, you don't even have to give your grandparents access to the anime library, or the kids one for that fact. You can just give them access to the main one. If you have 3 or 4 friends and family with little kids, you can share that library with them and not with people who don't. So this gives some flexibility. And the same with a movie library sort folder. Maybe you have a small 4K collection just for you, but your outgoing bandwidth won't support that with a few family and friends. You don't have to share this library with anybody else. And you can easily have the same movie here that you have in the main library. And again, we go through the same thing. A kids movie library. I personally have a documentary movie library, a concert movie library, the performing arts movie library I showed you, a kids movie library, and so on. And even if you're going to share home videos in the other library, you could have a folder for Christmas videos. You could have a folder for work project videos that you want to show off to friends and family. You can have a folder of just Halloween videos. You can kind of nest your content to find easily while also pointing separate libraries at it. And if you really wanted one other video library, even though your content's sorted, but you want it all in one large other video library, you simply point the library at this level. And the same with the movies. Say you're starting off small and you do eventually want to have separate libraries. Well, you can point everything at first to this level, and then later on change and point your main movie library just here and create a kids only library and so on. So this nested folder structure is great for someone starting out. And Adrian, I'm not suggesting that you have to change to this, but what I am suggesting is that Filebot can be run from a local computer and access media on your Synology NAS, which I'll show, and rename media. So this is all public domain movies that I use as examples if I want to show a movie playing on my YouTube channel, so I don't get in trouble with a YouTube strike. Now, Filebot has a default expression that names to TMDB just like this, but it has a very simple file name. It would not have the TMDB info in it, and it would not have the media characteristics like I show. This is a perfectly compliant Plex file name that will match each and every time, no matter how many new servers you throw at the media. I like a descriptive file name so I can just look at it and know whether I've got 5.1 audio or it's just stereo. I want to know whether it's encoded with H.264 versus H.265. I want to know if it's 720p, 1080p, 480p, or 2160p for 4K content. My expression also tells me if there's embedded subtitles in it, and it will say either ENSUB or UNDSUB, depending on whether it has English embedded subtitles or unlabeled subtitles, that I'll check to see if they're English and then reflag as English. And of course it creates a structure. Filebot's default expression puts their version of this into a folder called Media and a subfolder called Movies. And I actually haven't tried it on a Synology NAS with a shared media folder called Media. It won't work normally, but it will create that structure on your local PC before you move the media to the Synology NAS. Every Filebot video shows my custom expressions, and they will create structure in place on the Synology NAS. And I also have expressions that just rename the media without creating the structure. So you can get to this level quite easily. And what I might do if I were you is try to work in small batches. But I'm going to show you how Filebot can rename all of this. So I can right click and choose open with Filebox from this Linux desktop. I don't know what's possible under Windows. I gave it up in 2006. So all of this loads up. So if I was going to use Filebot's default expression, I'd have to hold down the Shift key to click here with the presets, because once I add my own expressions, those are hidden, but the Shift key brings them back. Organize movies for Plex is Plex's default expression. And there's other ways to use Filebot without an expression too. So I'm running a full backup from my newer DS1520 Plus to my older DS1019 Plus. I've rearranged things and I'm starting fresh with my backup. So that's going on in the background and made the opening of these files a little bit slower. It's always faster locally, a little bit slower on the NAS, and because I'm doing things in the background, a little slower. So you'll see Filebot's expression wants to create that media folder and then the movies library folder, and then it creates the same show folder as what I already have, but then it names the movie very simply without the media characteristics that I use. Well, every Filebot video of mine shows how to add all my custom expressions. Here, I've been meaning to do this because this is something I did just for a video. Let me click into this, delete it, click into this, delete it. Okay, so I had created those two expressions, which were duplicates of what I had, to show how to do one in another video. So these are my top two most used expressions. It creates structure and names to TMDB. So I have that listed as 1 for my movies, and 2 does the same thing from TVDB for TV series. Oh, I gotta remove this simple one too, because that's a duplicate. Well, I can just show that. Let me show that. That just renames in place very simply, just like Filebot's default expression does, but without creating structure. And then this one uses the IMDb source ID to rename only. I would suggest using TMDB, but some people like the IMDb source ID, so whatever floats your boat, this is just as right as the TMDB source ID. And then this one renames with a TMDB source ID only, and green means it's not going to be renamed. Except for this one. You see how I've manually put an addition tag in? My expressions with Filebot can pick up on common addition names in the folder or the file name, but not uncommon ones. And I label 4K movies with this 4K addition tag, and that's uncommon, so my expression's not picking it up, which is why it would convert this to a plainly named movie. Now, it doesn't really matter much if you have a separate 4K library, except if you have the same movie in your regular movie library. If you start either one and don't finish the movie, you'll have the movie poster from both libraries on your continue watching. And you have to click into each one to see which one was, say, 1080p or 4K. This addition tag is a Plex Pass feature, and if you add that manually, all your 4K movies will have that. So if you start the 4K movie and don't finish it, that will be the only one on your continue watching. if you start the 1080p version and don't finish it, only the 1080p version will be on your continue watching. So again, Filebot with my expression can pick up common edition tags like remastered, unrated, director's cut, and so on. I use two non-standard edition tags, the 4K, and I also use colorized because I have maybe about 12 movies where I have the colorized version that was done years later along with the original version. And these 4K editions and the colorized editions are the only ones that I could not run through Filebot again and keep those edition tags. So that's kind of off in the weeds, but so green means it won't rename. It's already named that way. And let me see what else I have. That's about it. I can name to TMDB or IMDB with or without structure, and all of my expressions add the extra media characteristics in. So again, I won't go into any support articles because each Filebot video does that, but I would break this into small chunks to start renaming your media. But you can do larger chunks, and let me do this again. Let me open this up with Filebot. And let me use my best expression that renames and creates structure. Even though the structure is already there, it won't screw up. It'll just be the same structure. So again, we talked about this. You can go through line by line, and unfortunately the Filebot interface doesn't scale well under Linux with what I set my Linux desktop up at. For example, the font's just larger on this and I can't adjust it in Filebot, and that means usually I'll play around with my Linux desktop resolution and scaling to get it comfortable to see other apps while having the best Filebot interface I can. Sometimes this is too small to even read without adjusting those settings. So that's one con with Filebot, but it's such a worthwhile program, I'm not complaining. So you could load 100 movies up at once. You could load 300 movies up at once. As long as you go through line by line, looking from left to right to make sure that the file name that Plex couldn't scan in properly matches with what Filebot wants to name it as. And if Filebot's confused, it'll pop up a dialog asking you which movie it is, so you get that chance. And if Filebot really can't find it, write it down so you can rename it a little bit better so Filebot can then find it and maybe use a custom expression like I share in all my videos. But say these were more simply named and I wanted to preserve that 4K edition and not have Filebot ruin it. I could just select it and get rid of it for this renaming process and go back and rename it manually later. So anything that Filebot doesn't match, well here, let's do it this way. Let's use more simple structure. And let's change it to IMDb as an example. This is IMDb rename only. Now I've already removed that 4K edition movie. So this is going to change the structure to TMDB to IMDb. So if you find a movie that Filebot is matching as the wrong one, simply remove it, like I'm going to do with a couple of these. And actually, I think I picked the wrong expression. I have an IMDb one with structure. That'll be better to look at. And I've already removed the ones that would be the test ones that you'd be looking at that didn't have a match from side to side. So let me rename them. Now, of course, Plex will have to scan these in again and detect the intros and end credits, but at least they'll be named correctly. So now if I go into that library, you'll see the ones that I wasn't sure about Filebot handling are still their original folder names, and the ones that I was sure that Filebot was renaming properly, now have the alternate IMDb source ID, as does the file names. And this is an example of versioning. These two movies will scan in as the same poster, and then you can select which version to play from the three dots in the lower right hand side of the poster. So Filebot handles versioning too, as well as common edition tags. Now I happen to have a second folder for this movie under TMDB because there was another versioning example, a 4K one, and also a 4K edition example. So now you take your original ones that you didn't want to let Filebot rename wrong, and you might have to improve the basic file name. So if you simply had Big Buck Bunny and you had it in the typical goofy name that you might have acquired it in, which could be any gobbledygook, now let's rename that. Filebot might not be able to handle that until you at least got it back into Big Buck Bunny with a year. Maybe not in parentheses, but with a year. So let's see how Filebot handles that now. Actually, we can just open this up in Filebot alone. Alright, it's going to handle it fine because both movies are named properly except for this one. So let me remove that one because it can't handle the 4K edition tag. And let me go back into this. Let me fix this up even better. It's easier to talk about bad file names than it is to recreate them. Okay, so this is going to represent a scene release that might confuse Filebot. Alright, so I'll remove that 4K edition one because it's a non-standard edition, and I'll create structure. Okay, so this is a perfect example. Both Filebot and Plex are going to treat this movie as Buck 2011, which is the wrong movie, which I assume is part of the reason you have 500 missing titles. Well, the 500 missing titles are movies that are a duplicate of a movie you actually have or are unmatched movies. So Filebot's not perfect. It can't handle this. But if I simply fix the name without being fully compliant, what is it, 2008? If I simply do that, and I think while leaving this as goofy, Filebot can handle it. Alright, let me remove the edition of the 4K edition again, and go to my default structure. So now Filebot knows it's the right movie, even though the file name is goofy, but the folder has an improved structure. Not Plex compliant, but improved. And that renames it as it should be. So it left the 4K edition in the original structure because I removed it from Filebot. But then it created this structure with only that one movie in it. And I still have these two versions that were named to IMDb. So now just to show the versatility of Filebot, I'm going to open up all these different folders in Filebot again and apply my standard expression. And only because Filebot can't handle this non-standard edition tag of 4K, I'm going to remove that, which is still in its original structure. So now we have two of them being renamed and going into the right structure, and one of them not being renamed because it's green. I know this is a lot for somebody brand new to Filebot, but it's not. This isn't a tutorial to follow so much as it is an example. So if I refresh the window, I'm still back to this because I haven't been renaming this. So I can take it out and drop it into this folder and then get rid of that. And now I'm back to where I started with 4 different versions of this movie in the correct folder structure. So Filebot is probably the best tool to install after you get Plex server going. Maybe Tautuli and Filebot are on the same level. And again, I recommend only things that work under Linux, Mac, and Windows. I don't recommend Windows and Mac only tools. It has to work under Linux too because Linux is my world. And Adrian, your Synology NAS is running Linux, so get in the Linux world too. Anyway, before this video gets too long, anybody running a Synology NAS or even an unraid Plex server container, I can help with a lot of issues, and I make direct support videos on YouTube. I'm not a professional YouTuber. I am a Plex enthusiast. I've become a Synology NAS enthusiast, and I am now a unraid Docker container enthusiast. Now, Adrian, for a future world, your NAS has the same iGPU as my NAS. It's perfectly adequate, but I'll show you a possible future. It opened off screen, but I'm running unraid on a little Intel NUC. It's a mobile processor, the i5-1135G7, which means it runs cooler than a desktop processor. I have 32 gigs of memory in this system. Unraid is running only as a Docker host. I have no storage besides a little flash drive that fills in as a storage drive. That's a requirement to get the array started. Unraid 7 is in beta right now and does away with that requirement. So once it's stable and I upgrade, I'll be able to remove this fake storage drive from my system. But you see, for a 64 gigabyte flash drive, there's a lot of storage free because it's not being used in any way really besides being identified. I use 2 Western Digital NAS SSDs as my cache pool, and coming from a Synology NAS, we think of cache as temporary storage to help with reads or writes to improve our files transfer speed. Think of a cache pool in unraid as just another RAID 1 array on any NAS. This is where the Docker containers run, and you don't need much storage. So let me swap back to this window. Here's my Plex Docker. I run Channels DVR as a better DVR. I've installed Filebot as a test here in order to be able to rename media on my Synology NAS when I'm away from home and not at my local desktop computer where I normally use Filebot. This program called GAPS runs in a container, and it searches out your movie library for missing collection. It's very helpful, but unfortunately I never realized how many movies that are listed in collections at TMDB were direct-to-video releases that might have 2 IMDb stars out of whatever. I usually want a movie to hit 5 stars out of 10 before I'll add it to my server, and there's a lot of collections I don't want to complete because they were direct-to-video releases that nobody wants to see. Tautuli, again, as helpful as Filebot. It collects data on how your server is being used. You can see which devices or which users are transcoding. It can tell you how many users you had. Like you can set up a 300 days watch on it, so to speak, the last 300 days. And out of those last 300 days, it'll tell you the most number of streams you had connected at once. My best is 13. For the last 90 days, my best is 6 streams all simultaneously. So those are the Dockers running. And let's go back here. With those Dockers running, and even with a large Plex server database, out of the 500 gigabytes of my cache pool, I'm only using 126 for all those containers, so you don't need big storage. And I would just suggest NAS quality drives. Most unraid people just run regular desktop SSDs. But I swap mine out for NAS quality drives, and I use Seagate Iron Wolf or Iron Wolf Pro drives in my Synology hardware. And then flash drive runs off, unraid runs off a flash drive. So this system is portable. As long as you move your drives, your cache drives, your storage drives, and your flash drive to new hardware, it's very easy to reconfigure your current unraid setup quickly to be back up and running on new hardware. And updates are easy. If you want to update the Docker containers, you check for updates. I don't have anybody streaming on my Plex server. I don't think. Oh, I do, so I won't update. But you simply check for updates and you update right here. If nobody was streaming, I'd force an update or do the update, and 20 seconds later the container is updated. So it's even easier updating Plex on an unraid host than it is a Synology. So this is maybe a possible future for you, Adrian, or a possible future for someone running Plex on a Synology NAS. If you want to keep your media in the secure Synology ecosystem like I do, but gain a better iGPU. And my NUC project was basically a vanity project. My server handled all my users fine. I'm not sharing 4K media, and I have a gig internet connection. So my Celeron CPU, the 9th gen Celeron CPU, and its iGPU in my DS1520 Plus was perfectly adequate and met all my needs. I wanted to see how many 4K transcodes I could do on the 11th gen Intel i5 processor, and I ran out of devices at 8 simultaneous complex 4K streams locally. And it was a nice little upgrade, and it let me do a lot more Plex experiments. So Adrian, again, I'm not a professional YouTuber. I try to give you great information, and this is long already. We're approaching 38 minutes, but it's all in the naming, and I have plenty of videos to help you with Filebot that explain the background support articles of why you should use good file names. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is not why you're missing 500 movies, but it's the likely reason. And if you're missing it for another reason, once I figure out why, once you give me enough detail to figure out why, I'll help you with that too. So until then, happy Plexing, and thanks for watching.